Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to On the Bright Line podcast, Tales from Recovering Food Addicts from the perspective of a physician, a therapist, and an off-the-wall storyteller. We are not affiliated or endorsed by Brightline Eating, and all content presented in this podcast represents our personal opinions and does not represent medical, nutritional, or psychological professional advice. Well, hello, and welcome to the next episode of On the Bright Line podcast. Again, Robin is remoting into us. Hi, Robin, from afar, not that afar, but afar. And Bonnie and I are in her house. Thanks so much for hosting, Bonnie. We had a little sleepover last night, which was super fun. That's a little aside for everybody. So today we are going to talk about IFS. So IFS, for those that maybe don't know or are being newly introduced to this, is internal family systems. So I'm going to let Robin do some more explaining about what IFS is and how that relates to from a therapy perspective, because I am not, I have done some work in internal family systems, and I know Bonnie has as well through the BLE program. It's one of the forms of introspection that I think BLE uses to help us get down to what we call the quote unquote inner work. I'm putting that in air quotes for everybody who's watching on YouTube. You can see that, but the inner work that needs to go on. So, jokingly we say this is a food program, but like the honest to goodness truth is this is so much more than a food program. It's a recovery program. It's, obviously we are food addicts and we are dealing with an addiction issue, and that is deep seated in inner workings of us, and past big T and little t traumas and all those things. And so it is really important to not just say here's the food you need to eat it. It's more important to say why do we eat the way we eat? Why do we use food or abuse food the way that we abuse food? And part of the system that BLE, Brightline Eating, has used is internal family system. So I've queued that up, I think, hopefully in an okay way, for Robin to then give us the overview of what is internal family systems and how that relates to therapeutic work.
Yeah, so internal family systems is a therapeutic approach. It was developed by Dick Schwartz, and it's the idea that our minds are composed of multiple parts, or distinct aspects of yourself, and each part has its own, beliefs, intentions, motivations, perspectives. It's not right. A lot of people are like, "Oh, you're talking about multiple personality disorder." That's not it. Those are very distinct things. But this is more of a metaphor to describe patterns of thoughts and behaviors that go on. And so each part is developed in response to a past experience, a past trauma, or as a protective mechanism. And so some of the language that we use to describe parts are, you know, exiles that hold our emotional pain, traumatic memories, vulnerable emotions. These are often younger parts, right, that have experiential pain or
Can I
unmet
ask
needs.
really quick, when you say younger
Yeah.
parts, can you explain that a little bit? Because like you're ageifying it. That's a word I just made up, I think.
Yeah,
But
that
let's talk
that
about that.
very often when we're doing internal family systems work and I'm talking to someone and they're kind of identifying a part that again maybe holds a lot of the emotions, and I'll ask people, how old do you feel right now when you are speaking from that part? Right. And I think everybody has had that experience of, you're in a situation and you're emotionally reacting or responding to something, right? And you go,
I raised my
why
hand for
do I,
people who aren't
right?
watching.
Why do I freaking feel like I'm 10 years old again? It's like
Or
because,
15.
or right, or whatever age, right? Even if it's 20, whatever, because we hold those parts within ourselves, and that we are responding from those parts, right? Uh-oh,
I know.
technical
We're
difficulty.
having a sprinkles issue.
Oh,
We're gonna have to pull the camera
sprinkle.
back. It's okay. Whoa.
Oh, oh,
It's everything's gone awry. Keep going, Robin. Keep talking. We'll fix the camera.
okay,
We'll fix the
okay.
camera. For those of you who are not watching on YouTube, Sprinkles was
Oh,
knocking at the tripod and Bonnie tried to fix it, as Bonnie does. You've got the camera lens covered. And
oh,
now it's a
sprinkle.
mess. Maybe you need
Whoa,
the
I'm
ear,
dizzy.
the ear things underneath it to prop it up.
There you
No,
go.
the ear things. They're orange. They're on the ground. My gosh.
Sorry.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
Sorry. Sorry. Okay,
Oops.
Robin, you were
Uh,
saying.
Okay, so exiles are those parts that, and we generally push them away from our awareness, and they're kind of hidden to protect you from re-experiencing the pain that's associated with those parts, right? The other part that I think anybody that's had issues with eating understands are the manager parts, and those are the protective parts. And a lot of people love those parts, right? Because they can be very, very, very functional, right? They can keep us organized and on task. Those parts are right. Their purpose is to protect those exiled parts from basically being triggered, and helps us keep a sense of control and safety, right? And so, do either of you recognize that you have some manager part?
Oh, for sure. I think
I,
my
I was like, I think that's probably the pretty dominant
yeah, I think
part.
my
I think
manager
Right,
part stuffs all my other parts in the basement.
yeah. I think
right,
And I think that
exactly.
sometimes in BLE, that part is called the controller, just so you know, like that's the
Uh-huh.
language that I've heard used, but manager controller. And I know that this is one of the most dominant, like honestly, like one of the
Yep.
most dominant parts for me, and which is why I do so well with BLE because it
Mhm.
wants to keep the lines and it wants to
Yeah.
control all the things. And so it is in, that part of me is in its happy place when we're weighing and measuring our food, when we're writing down our food at night, when we're doing those things, those tasks help my manager controller part feel at ease and feel, comfortable, right?
Right. Safe, right? Because
Safe. There you
I'm
go. Yeah,
gonna
yeah, yeah.
right, I'm gonna quiet all the emotions that the exiles are holding, right? So let's hit the next part, which is firefighters. And firefighters are kind of the reactive part that emerge when sometimes when those little emotional exiles are activated. And again, they're in response to, strong feelings, when we're overwhelmed by, intense emotions. So they're the emergency responders. They're
Catastrophizers.
well, they're not necessarily catastrophizers, but they're the ones that go, oh my gosh, again, we're having strong emotions. So let's find a way to tamp those down.
Mine's a
Let's,
rebel. I can tell you what mine is. My firefighter is a rebel.
well, but sometimes rebels are exiles, not necessarily firefighters.
My firefighter is a rebel because my rebel wants to burn it down all the time.
Well, that would be a fire starter.
Well, but
Right.
but I'm saying
But
like
the,
when the rebel part is active for me, it is 100% like let me get my fix, let me find my fix someplace, and sometimes that's doing careless things like risky things, and that's how it shows up.
right. Because they want, right, they want that distraction. They want the, you know,
Nobody's going to tell me what to do. That is how it shows up for me.
right, right. And that can be like, that's where we get the substance abuse, the binge eating, the,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
self-harm, sex, shopping, right? All of those. And so the struggle is that balance between managers and firefighters, right? Because we like to be in balance, right? And so if you've got a super rigid manager, your firefighters may then also get super extreme, right? Oh,
Wow,
if
that
you're going to control,
actually is very enlightening. I had no idea that that was the reason why. Because I'm always like, I have a really strong manager, but I also have a really strong rebel. How is that
yep,
possible for them to
yep,
coexist? But what you're saying is that it's
yep,
because they have to balance each other.
yep.
Oh, I just had an
Ding, ding,
epiphany.
ding, ding, ding.
Thanks,
Right,
Robin. Thanks, Robin.
right. Sorry. Um, and and so right, so the the healthiest aspect of our self is self, right? That self energy. And
Centered
self
self.
energy,
That's the terminology that BLE uses. They call it your centered
right,
self. Yeah.
right. And so when we are in self, when we are in really healthy self, it's a very different feeling. I describe it as kind of similar to like flow. So if you're an artist, or even a runner, and you get in the zone, right? When you are in the zone and you are calm, you are compassionate, you are non-judgmental. That's kind of synonymous with really being in good self energy. And so the kind of the goal of that of IFS is to be able to recognize your parts, right? They're not bad. We don't need them to go away. We don't need them to stop doing what they're doing. We might need them to soften what they're doing. We might need to invite them at times to step back a little bit, right? Like I know that for me, I have a firefighter part that loves to use humor, right? So I know if I'm getting really stressed and I start, I am cracking jokes and ha ha ha, right? That is my firefighter part. And sometimes I really need that part to be a little quieter, right? So that I can simply be present. And so being willing to recognize when that part is popping up and being willing to go, hey, guess what? I don't need you to do that right now. I've actually got this, right? And I think the struggle for a lot of people is that our parts have recognized that we are very often not in self energy. And so our parts go, well, I have to step in and drive the bus. I've got to take over here because self isn't doing it. And self never does it. So I have to get loud and I have to be here and I have to do my job. Right. And
But
so
it's a
when we
protection.
start,
I think that that's the really
it is.
important distinction in what I hear you saying is that this is not sprinkles with the camera again.
Sprinkles.
I'm sorry. Um, I think that that's the important distinction is that these are not self-destructive for self-destruction. They are using what have been long-standing protective
Yep.
mechanisms that we have adopted in our life because
Yep.
we have needed them for whatever reason, big T, little t
Yep.
traumas, and I think
Yep.
that that's the really important thing because I think a lot of times people want to be, uh, you know, they want to be the antithesis or feel like they're doing like it's wrong, like bad, like there's
Right.
a put a value on it, like that there's good and
Right.
bad. And there's actually a book called No Bad Parts that talks about,
Right.
and I haven't read it, so sorry guys. Maybe that'll be next on my reading list, but
Yeah, it's a good
um,
book.
it is a good book. Okay, well, Robin's read it, of course. Robin's read it,
There's
but
some other ones that I would also recommend. But
okay, well, yeah, we'll get to book recommendations, but
right.
anyway,
Right.
so
Right.
yes, I think that that's really the important part to the important distinction is that even though yes, I have this rebel part that sometimes annoys me because it's so the antithesis of my rigid manager part and just wants to f the world and do whatever I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not being bad. It's not. There's no moral value to that. It's just trying to protect me and using
Yeah.
tools that I have used throughout my entire life as protective mechanisms when stress happens. Right? I mean, am I
Yeah.
evaluating that correctly? Okay.
That's exactly it. That our parts are doing what they know to do. Right. And it's that idea of not, again, when we're in that self energy and when we can avoid judging those parts and when we can actually connect with them and go, oh my gosh, oh yes, I totally get little rebel part what you think you need to do here, right? I get why you're doing what you're doing, but hey, I am now in self energy and I've actually got this, right?
And I think, some people hear about this parts work thing and start to get to like, again, getting back to that, you're implying I have multiple personalities. I don't really feel like I
Right.
have a bunch of little people inside my head, like that movie that came out about the emotions or whatever, right?
Inside
Right.
Out. It's the best movie
Inside
ever.
Out, yeah.
Inside Out.
But
Yeah.
Yes, they're coming out with
but
the second
really,
one.
like
Oh,
this system, IFS, is really just a way to identify your own emotions and behaviors and kind of
yeah.
personify them so you can actually
Yeah.
start to really understand why some of your subconscious behavior is happening. Right? It is all just you.
Yeah.
It's all just you
Yep.
doing these things, right? But it's sort of giving a personification to these different parts of your personality that have been
Hmm.
controlling your behavior without you realizing how it was happening. I
Yeah.
think for a lot of people with food addiction, one of their biggest players in the internal family system is the indulger, right? And I think
Yeah.
like for, as Meagan said, big T and little T trauma, the indulger is for me, I think of the indulger as this sweet little grandmother figure that is, giving me treats.
Hmm.
It's funny.
And,
Mine's like a
Hmm.
50s housewife with an apron and
I love
everything.
it. And mine's a grandmother, a very
No,
loving
no,
grandmother.
she's like vivid in my
Oh,
mind.
that's so
Yeah.
funny.
Hmm.
I
And
love
so,
it.
this part of myself, gives me a hug and gives me something good to eat. Sprinkles is still moving the
I
camera,
know.
guys. I'm gonna
Right.
have to move
Right.
her again.
It's
She's napping, she's asleep, snoring, and then like rolling over and shoving the camera tripod. Yeah. Yeah, that's my life with Sprinkles. So anyway, I think like I really through the BLE program itself has modules in it if you're a member that work through internal family systems, and there are some modules. There's a gentleman named
Everett.
Everett Considine, who's a
Mhm.
BLE member, and also does the education about internal family systems and some of the modules in the membership. Like Robin was saying, there's a bunch of books you can read about internal family systems. So you don't have to be a paying BLE member to learn about this stuff. But I think
And there are also therapists that do this,
absolutely
specialists. You
there's
could you
therapists that
could
do
go
this
out
as
and
well.
find an IFS therapist. So
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to understand, again, BLE is not just a diet or a food plan. It's a whole
Yeah.
process of dealing with food addiction, which very much includes getting down to the root causes of how your addiction started, how your coping with life led to some of these parts taking over and giving you food to help you cope with whatever. And this is one tool, this internal family systems type of therapy is one tool that you can use to help kind of deal with that. So I think for me, when I started working through the modules, that's the first thing that really tagged for me when I went through the
Hmm.
IFS modules, is like, oh, this is the big part of my personality that I've really never acknowledged, or I thought about in an
Mm.
external way, that I basically, to protect myself or make myself feel more comforted or loved or supported, this indulger came in and gave me, the foods that made me feel good in the moment. And,
Hmm.
you have to get to that point where you sort of acknowledge, oh, I get why that happened, right? That did make me feel better. It served a purpose. It is not a bad
Yeah.
part or an evil part or something I need to expunge, right? But it's starting to say, can I let that indulger do something else that makes me feel good instead of just giving me food, right?
mhm.
And that's how you
Yeah.
begin to use the parts work to your advantage. Like Robin said, you're not trying to get rid of a part or label a part as bad. You're trying to take a part that's, part of your personality, the part of your personality that loves you and recognizes you need to love yourself. Could you love yourself in a better way, right? In a healthier way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said.
Is there any other, did we go over all the parts? I know we've kind of been a little squirrely because of the tripod and everything. Like I know, I'm just like, did we get them all in there?
Yeah, we did.
Okay,
We
okay,
did.
good. Sorry guys. We were dealing with the tripod. So, um yeah, so I think the talking about IFS, like, this brings up a lot for people. I know, I think one of the things that I've heard, and you can comment on this if you want, Robin, if you have
Mhm.
any insider ideas, is that, like, people have likened it to multiple personality disorder, but I think about, like, the reality is like that's a non-integrated internal family system, right? So that's like those are very segregated parts of that person, and that's why they manifest that
Yeah.
way. And
Yeah.
so when we're talking about people, someone who doesn't suffer from MPD,
Hmm.
it's we are integrated in a way that we can seamlessly move, transition, and there's not and overtaking, and so, and I
Right.
think that there's also, I know there's people within our community that really struggle with the idea of, like, voices in their head, and, like, that being, like, equated with mental illness and that sort of thing. So I mean, I know that there's literature out there. I didn't know if you had anything that you could
Well,
recommend.
and right. And so we talk about being in self, and it's on a continuum, right? When I am fully in self versus when maybe I am self-led versus when I am not in self, and more on the continuum towards dissociation,
Okay.
right? And so that idea of you know, people, I know what you're saying, that people say, oh, the idea that I have voices in my head. But I think the reality is most people go, yeah, I totally have voices in my head. And sometimes it's my mom's voice. And
Right.
sometimes it's this judgmental voice. And when you start talking about that, people are like, oh, yeah, like I get it when sometimes I sound judgmental. I'm like, right. And now let's talk about the part of you that is showing up that is judgmental,
Mm.
right? And versus the part of you that is, you know, fun, lightness, firefighter, fluffy, let's make everything happy.
I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
the like almost, I think there's actually a disorder where people don't have an inner monologue, but I mean, almost everybody has an inner monologue.
Yeah.
You're talking to yourself in your head quite a bit of the day, which is different than hearing voices external to yourself,
Exactly.
which is a hallucination, or like you're saying, a complete dissociation. Hearing voices
Yeah.
that aren't there versus hearing my own voice in my head. I'm having a dialogue with myself, or there's an ongoing dialogue.
And very often when I have people say, oh, I don't have that inner monologue, or I don't know what I'm saying to myself in my head, generally it's because things are moving so fast, or they are so disconnected, right? In our American society, we are so disconnected from what's going on in our heads and what's going on in our bodies. And when we are very, very much in our heads, we can be very, very much against about balance. We can be very disconnected from what's going on in our bodies. I have a lot of people that will say, "Oh, I'm so clumsy. I'm always bumping into things. I cut myself. I whack my hand on stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, that's because you are not in your body. You are so in your head. You are not even spatially aware of where your body is at the moment."
Wow. I didn't even know that was a thing, but that makes so much sense.
Yep,
Holy cow.
yep.
Wow.
Yeah, I
But
zoom and go
again,
fast, 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 and I run into things because my mind is trying to stop myself from feeling feelings.
Mm.
And
yep,
so I don't want to feel feelings, so
yep.
I speed up, and I'm in a hurry to get everything done, and hurry, 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 hurry. And yeah, all in my head and not in my body. Totally. Most of my life. Yeah.
Well, and again,
Right.
like, let's harken it back to the food addiction. Is like the reality is that we numbed out with food. And you
Yeah.
can numb out
Yep,
with a lot of things. This
yep.
happens to be a podcast about food addiction, but
Yeah.
like
Right.
this you could definitely extrapolate this to any other addiction that there is when you're using a substance or a process addiction, because there's also process addictions, right?
Mm-hmm.
To numb yourself from the feelings. It's very much like what you're saying, is like you're trying to do something to not have to feel the
Yep.
feelings. And so
Yep.
now, okay, let's, and we're gonna actually gonna do another episode, guys, where we talk about
Mm-hmm.
like dealing with the parts. That sounds really
Right.
ominous, but
Right.
you know what I mean? Like we're gonna take that onto another episode, because that's a big conversation too.
Befriending.
Befriending the part. Oh, I love that, Robin. Reframe. That's a great reframe, Robin. But oh, where was I going with that? Uh anyway, we're gonna talk about that. But what was I saying before? I totally lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
You were talking about the numbing out.
Oh yeah, the numbing out. And
Mhm.
so once we've taken the numbing, whatever the numbing thing is, away from us, like whether that be drugs, alcohol, food, sex, whatever,
Mhm.
like whatever your addiction is, once you take that away, now you're left with feelings, right?
Yep.
Now you're left with feelings, and you're left with these parts, and then they might go hog wild, because they're like, I have all these feelings I have to deal with because I'm not numbed out the way I was before. And this is something I
Yes.
personally am going through right now in my life, is realizing that like that numbing isn't there anymore. Now I have to deal with what's
Yep.
going on in a real self-centered sounds bad, but like in
Centered self.
it, so yeah, my centered self, as in my
Right.
authentic self, which I've never had to do before in my entire
Yeah.
life, because I always used the food to numb myself out from those feelings. So
Right. Which can be the kicker of, great, I've learned how to manage my food. Holy moly, I'm having all these feelings.
Now what do I
And
do?
that's right. And that's very often where we can then go, oh, I think I'm gonna,
Go shopping.
go shopping, right? Smoke or have sex or this or that, right?
Yeah.
That that idea of, you know, that's why I love BLE so much, because they really do focus on that deeper self, the real root of the issue,
Right.
right? We're getting to the driver
Right.
of the eating. It's not just, right, and we all, I know we've all said this, it's not that I don't know what to put in my mouth and what
Yeah.
not to put in my mouth. I know what I should eat and not eat.
Right.
I know the behaviors I should choose. It's that core of why.
And this is interesting because I was having a conversation. I was in California last weekend, and I had a conversation with a friend of mine that I went on a hike with. Hi, Jessica. Hey, Jessica. Anyway, and we were talking about when we were pregnant, because she has, she has a child as well, and I have two.
Mhm.
If you're new here, sorry, like over explaining for some reason. And we were talking about how easy it was when we had a baby inside of us in our body to treat ourselves well, whether that was
Yeah.
stopping drinking, stopping smoking,
Mhm.
eating healthy, which is what I had to do because I had gestational diabetes, like
Mhm.
all these things, and how easy it was to stay on track when it was externally focused. I mean, obviously the baby was inside, but like
Right.
not, it was about more than just me, but that we
Right.
couldn't do it for ourselves, just for ourselves.
Yeah.
And it took obviously
Mm.
like BLE, she's in BLE as well, but like it took
Mhm.
BLE to get us to the place where we're like, oh, we now can figure out how to do this for ourselves as well. But like, I mean, that was just like, it was kind of a, mind blow, because
Yeah,
it
it's
was like,
because you love your baby unconditionally and you'll do anything to
Yeah.
protect them. And yet,
but why can't I do that for myself?
bingo, that's a whole nother
Sorry, just
topic.
got a
No,
weird accent when I said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do we have anything else to say in our general overview of IFS? Is there anything we left out, Robin, that you want to add in?
Oh gosh, I think one of the things that we were kind of touching on was the idea that it's it may be vitally important for people that are hearing this to maybe recognize, you know what, I do need to get into some therapy. I do need to work on some of these deeper issues that are coming up now that, now that the food has been taken away. Um, and that specifically can be about, growing as a person to not get pulled into, eating again, or a different type of addiction, to really triumph over some of the past issues, traumas, etc.
Yeah, good point. Do you have anything else that you want to add, Bonnie?
I would just reiterate that you do not have to be a member of BLE to get this information. You can get a book from the library about it. You can,
Mhm.
there's lots of different ways to explore your past and your self-development and your own growth and progression. But I
Mhm.
just think it is critically important. I just think about, this addiction of food is a crutch to help cope with emotional pain. And if
Yeah.
you have a person who can't walk and you take their crutches away, they're going to fall down or get another crutch. And so lots of people
Yep.
have substituted other things for eating when they take it away, just like, when some people take away eating and start smoking, or when they take away smoking, they
Yep.
start eating, or, I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
if you do not take some time to deal with your emotional growth and really come to terms with what you need to do to be a happy, centered self, you're at risk for relapsing in your food addiction or taking on another addiction. So just please take it seriously. This is a comprehensive, this really isn't just a diet. BLE is not
Yep.
just a diet. It's not just, yes, you can eat these foods, and if you eat the foods with the way it's prescribed, you'll lose weight, but you won't be able to sustain this program
Yeah.
if you don't get the support you need
Yeah.
internally and externally
Yeah.
to grow and heal.
Yeah. Beautiful. I
Mhm.
don't think I need to wrap it up. I think Bonnie did it for me. Thanks so much,
Yep.
Bonnie. So we are going to do a continuation of this in our next episode. So if you're interested in learning more about IFS, and we're going to kind of touch on, how maybe to work with your parts, right? That's a good way to say it.
Mhm.
We're not
Mhm.
dealing with them or working against them. We're working with them.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go over that in the next episode. But we are very grateful for everyone who continues to listen to our ramblings and see sprinkles hit the tripod pod. Sorry about that for everybody on YouTube and that little shenanigan that happened. But we do appreciate you listening, and we love this community. I want to say that I don't always say that, and I know I put it out
Yeah.
on social media, but this community is amazing, and just the support that you guys have shown for us in this little podcast that we got going on here. So, as always, if you have topic ideas, questions, or otherwise that you want to submit to us, please feel free at onthebrightlinepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on any of our socials. Have a beautiful day.